How about this? The U.S. Park Police are...
Let's start by storming Blackgate!
What's going on, everyone? So the Tree of Life 2011 turns 10 this year, so gives me a very good excuse to finally review this film. And I know I have 2 copies of this movie. I can explain. So this was the cut that I owned. I picked it up, I believe it was like 2016. This is the theatrical cut that was released by 20th Century Fox. And recently, I heard a lot of people talking about the extended cut, which is on Criterion. And I was like, you know what? I've heard a lot of good things about the film, and even though I think the pacing is a bit bumpy in the theatrical cut, sometimes I feel like it's a little too slow. I'll bite the bullet and I'll watch it because there's an additional 15 minutes, as well as I absolutely love this the look of it. I think it's incredible. I'm very glad I did because I think that this is the definitive cut. But I do want to say this right off the bat: The Tree of Life. This is a film that reviewing it, it's not going to be easy to do so. It is a film that it's a lot to take in, and I think that it's going to be all over the place, this review, more so than my usual review. So just be prepared. If you're new to the channel, this is not usually how it goes, but this is a film that's going to be something that I want to try to talk about a lot of stuff, but here we go. So before I get into it, though, I do want to say that I'm joined by Adam from V.I.B'Z. He is someone that on YouTube you should definitely subscribe to, and he is a huge supporter of this channel. We've worked together on my ranking of Denis Villeneuve's films ranked worst to best, so I'm very happy that he was able to collaborate with that. So definitely check that out, as well as his channel. But I'm going to take it over to him so that way he can give his thoughts on this film, because he wanted to obviously do another review with me, and I was like, well, I'm doing reviews for movies that turned 10 years old this year. So I gave him a list, and he decided to pick The Tree of Life because he had never seen it before, so it gave him a good reason to, finally sit down and watch it. So you're going to hear the perspective of someone that watched it for the first time, as well as someone that's seen it a dozen times. So all that exposition aside, guys, let's kick it off to Adam. Take it away.
So thank you again to Chad for having me on. It's great to be back. Chad had asked me kind of what movie I want to talk about, gave me a couple options, and I decided to go with this one because it's a movie I'd never seen before. And Terrence Malick's always a guy that's interested me. I've always wanted him to get into his movies. I haven't seen The Thin Red Line, haven't seen Badlands, which are both movies I really want to see, and I've seen part of Days of Heaven. Sadly, when I watched it, I didn't get to finish it, and it's another one I have to revisit soon. But nonetheless, The Tree of Life. So I kind of knew what to expect. I'd been told about it a little bit. I've seen clips, I've seen trailers and that kind of thing, and definitely the style was something that I was warned about. And I have to say, overall, it really worked for me. The pacing is definitely a little off in the first half of the film, which is something that I noticed right off the bat and distracted me just because I didn't really know where the story was going. And for a while there, I was thinking I probably won't like this film. But by the second half of the movie, I kind of got on board, especially through the cosmic rebirth sequence that is so iconic with all those shots in space. That's when I started to pick up on the fact that, yeah, this is a movie that means something. The movie stars Brad Pitt, who's really good. Sean Penn, though, I think his performance was a little confused. Penn has said of the film that he thinks the structure and the style was a little too confusing, and that the story would have been presented better in a more linear fashion. And while I agree to an extent, I think that the purpose of the film would be defeated if that were done. One of my favorite sequences, a controversial sequence in the film, involves 2 dinosaurs, where the one stomps on the other's neck, and we get this beautiful moment. The first act of compassion is like ignited in this one velociraptor, and he lets the other raptor go. And then we see that displayed throughout the rest of the film, through each character, kind of continuing this compassion that began with the dinosaur. And that's a courtesy of the non-linear structure. But aside from that, all the performances are quite brilliant. I think the child performances in the film are some of the best that I've ever seen, especially the young version of Jack. I think he's played quite well. The look of the film is magnificent. the underwater sequences were nightmare fuel for me. Very, very terrifying, and all the better for it. I think the music also was really, really fantastic. We learn about these little character moments, like with Brad Pitt's character, where we find out that he wanted to be a musician, and we hear his organ playing. And there's this really like strange gospel tone to all the music throughout the film. But I think that works with it because it's really talking about an ideology that I think Malick has, or at least is trying to convey. The character of the mother, played by Jessica Chastain, is basically a fallen angel. We see the one scene of her throughout the film where she's flying or floating. Another scene where she's walking across a completely barren landscape and the camera pans and zooms right past her, and we get these religious ideas from the film. Another thing that I also love is just the way the camera moves, the way the editing is done. It's such a unique take on all of that. All the scenes shot within that little town there, where Jack grows up, were all shot with natural lighting, which I thought was really, really interesting and gave it a very unique look, similar to Barry Lyndon. There's also something to be said about what Malick is trying to get at about a life, or at least what I interpreted that he was trying to get at about a life. We see Jack grow up, and we see the way that his past influences his future, and we see the similarities in the character of all of our protagonists and antagonists, and the way that each of them seems to follow pretty much the same lifeline. As I mentioned before with the dinosaurs, that's the dawn of compassion, and we kind of see how it kindles in each character, and for some it's stomped out, and for others it's ignited. So, for example, we can take Brad Pitt's character of the father, who seems like a rough, uncaring, jaded character, but at the same time we can see that there's this sadness behind his eyes, kind of indicating to me at least that this all comes from his father. His father treated him this way. This is how he thinks he's supposed to go about being a father, and he is just another innocent bystander who's been affected by the world and turned into this certain being because of it. And I think we see that same thing reflected in Jack, who starts to become violent and starts to take out his aggression on his brothers and on the world. And we sort of see him emanate this this negative attitude, this negative behavior within the second half of the film, which I think is reflective of that same narrative arc. Sort of he's becoming the man that he hates, which is his father. And obviously he overcomes that by the end, but some people don't, and sometimes we forget that we're all just victims. When Brad Pitt's character leaves for a bit and Jessica Chastain is left in charge of the kids, all of a sudden her loving, caring attitude towards them starts to shift, and we see her take an attitude of authoritarianism. It's sort of in replacement to Brad Pitt's character, because with him gone, all of a sudden the kids are now off the walls and they won't obey and they are disrespectful towards her. And now we have to kind of see that a little bit of authority is necessary in child rearing, and we kind of see some of the meaning behind Brad Pitt's actions. Not that they are justified, but that they are understood to an extent. Famously, of course, Douglas Trumbull of 2001: A Space Odyssey fame did some of the special effects work for the film because Malick was unsatisfied with the CGI computer animation of the time, which is, I mean, rightly so. The movie is reminiscent of 2001 in some ways, although obviously, in my opinion, 2001 is a superior project. What we see are lots of visual callbacks to that film throughout this one. Nominated for 3 Oscars, directing, Best Picture, and cinematography. It probably deserved each and every one of them, and I think it probably could have standed to get an editing nomination, which is, I think, it could be tightened up. I saw the theatrical version, which is a whole, what is it, like 30 minutes shorter than the director's cut, and even then I think that it could be tightened up a little bit. I think the pacing could use some work. I think the plot structure is somewhat strange, somewhat out of order, and could have been made clearer. And all that being said, I really can't critique the film too deeply. The way it was presented is so essential to the message it's trying to convey, and in that way, the film is really uncritiquable past a certain point, and Terrence Malick comes in, and his style and his vision is so magnificent, so large, and so major that it creates something that I've never seen before as a person who watches movies constantly. I think there's something really, really special about it. I think it should be appreciated. It should be remembered. And I think I'm going to go back and watch more of Malick's films now that I've seen this one. That he did something really, really special here. So, thank you, Chad, for having me on the channel. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for introducing me to the movie. I'm so glad that I got to see it. So glad that I got to talk about it, because there's a lot to say when it comes to the Tree of Life. So, with all that being said, I'll turn it back to you, and thank you again.
All right, thank you very much, Adam. So, The Tree of Life is a film that, much the same way of a lot of films turning 10 this year, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background information of my relationship with this film. So The Tree of Life is a film that I will never forget. It got nominated for some Oscars, in particular Best Picture, and at that point I was just getting into finally watching all the Best Picture nominations. I was, 15 when this movie came out, and I will never forget, I watched it, I believe it was the summer of 2012 is when I finally watched it. And my mom and I, we sat down and watched it. I got it from the library on DVD. And I did not like it. We both didn't like it. We shut it off 10 minutes into it. She was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's The Tree of Life." So we both didn't like it, so I shut it off. But those 10 minutes, I couldn't stop but think about it. So I decided a couple of years later to revisit it. And I really liked it. I thought it was really good. And then I revisited a couple more times, and I really liked it. But at the same time, I was really liking it. But I kind of felt that despite watching it many times and picking up on things, I kind of felt like, maybe I was missing something. Maybe that there was something that just was not pushing me far enough to really appreciate the film. And thankfully, I watched Carlos of Misfit Pond, who I'm a huge fan of, and we've collaborated together a couple times as well. But I watched his review and heard his thoughts on the extended cut, which is the one that I have here. And it was his first time watching it, and I was like, wow, the 3 hour and 8 minute cut, I believe it's like 15 minutes added on. He loved it. So I decided to finally bite the bullet and pick up the extended cut. And this is the version that made me realize I was missing 50 minutes of what added up to be, honestly, a masterpiece. This is the definitive version. I don't think I'll ever be able to watch the theatrical cut again. It's not to say the theatrical cut's bad. It's really good, and I do want to say this off the bat. The theatrical cut is what I would recommend to first-time viewers. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions to where, if you're into artistic visions, then obviously feel free to watch the extended cut. But I feel like for first-time viewers, especially of Terrence Malick, I feel like you definitely should watch the theatrical cut, because it is the one that definitely, it's not as long, so it's not as jarring as oh my goodness, I have to take in 3 hours and 8 minutes of this. But I feel like if you like the theatrical cut, definitely watch the extended cut, because I think that's the definitive version. The reason why I'm saying all this is because I think that it's important to realize that a film like this is something where you experience it differently with each viewing. For one viewing, there was a time where I thought that it was really good. Another viewing, I thought it was kind of slow, kind of dull and meandering. And then I would watch it again and I picked up more on it. So I feel like this is a film that really depends on your mood, where you are in life, as well as just what you've picked up on. For myself, recently when I watched this last summer, it was obviously in the midst of a pandemic. And obviously it's still going on as of the filming of this review. But I was picking it up and I was able to really think about everything that was going on in this movie. I was able to pick up on the nonlinear storytelling. Not that I didn't before, but I was able to pick up on why Terrence Malick used it. I feel like the nonlinear editing is really important to the story, because the story itself is really trying to grip you as just honestly feeling what the overall experience of life is. Not just for humans, but just in general for nature. It's one of the reasons why you have that creation sequence that is honestly one of the best sequences in film history. Not even lying. I love that sequence. It's about 10 minutes of visual storytelling, of just honestly the creation of the world. And it's outstanding. The universe sequence is just outstanding. I love the usage of color. I love the visual effects. Douglas Trumbull came out of retirement, same guy that worked on Blade Runner and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and his visual effects in this film are amazing. Honestly, should have won Best Visual Effects for 2011, but it wasn't even nominated, unfortunately. But it's incredible. And the usage of the score and the soundtrack during that sequence is ungodly. It's amazing. It's honestly kind of spiritual. I felt very much so like a spiritual connection watching this movie again. Honestly, also what I wanted to mention is that, piggybacking off of the mention of the cinematography, the visual effects, it's kind of crazy to see the usage of that to tell the story. It's matched by Terrence Malick's usage of voiceover, and for a lot of times, voiceovers might feel a bit jarring in movies, but Terrence Malick, it's part of his style. And I think that that's definitely hit or miss in some of his movies. Like his later work, post Tree of Life, didn't work per much. But this time around, it really felt organic with his approach because it makes you feel like you yourself are experiencing it the same way these characters are. And it's still left up enough to interpretation with what these characters are fully grasping. The other thing is that these characters, they feel very personable with Malick. It almost feels like these are characters based on his life, which, upon research, it seems like they are. I mean, Brad Pitt's character is apparently based on his dad, and it really shows because these characters, although obviously told a lot different in terms of character development from other movies, it feels very natural with its approach. And it's very interesting to see certain scenes, the way that they play out, especially since, again, the nonlinear storytelling, you're seeing it from the perspective of the kids, but then you're also seeing a cut back to, obviously, when they're adults, or obviously, I should say, the one guy, which is obviously played by Sean Penn. And you see, obviously, the contrast, but also the similarities to how, certain things that the kid did when he was younger, you see that obviously ripple onto, like, when he's an adult. And I think that that's fascinating. I really liked that aspect. So I think the characters are interesting for the most part. Obviously, it took a couple viewings for me to fully appreciate that aspect. But I think if anything else, this is just a film that you have to experience visually because that is what this film is trying to get at. It's a visual storytelling, honestly, pistache of an experience. It's very much so overwhelming. At least I am now. Like, honestly, I can see why some people might be underwhelmed upon first viewing because it's unlike anything you've really seen, man. I mean, it's the same thing with like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I know I said it's unlike anything you've seen, but it's similar to that movie in that it's mostly visual storytelling. And that's another film that when I first saw it, I wasn't a big fan of. It took me multiple viewings to watch, but I feel like as a critic, it's something that you need to be able to say. You need to be able to say, look, I was wrong about this film, or look, I've grown as a person. I've grown as someone that, likes film. And that's something that I'm here to say. 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's a film I grew on. It's a film that I absolutely love now. It's one of my favorite films of all time. Similarly to The Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is also one of my favorite films of all time now. It's because I grew as a viewer. And that's something that I don't think it's a bad thing to admit. I think if anything, it helps you as a person. And that's what The Tree of Life is also trying to say. That growth as a human can sometimes be at a max, but at the same time, it's important to still try. And this is a film that's all about trying. It's a film that is about experiencing things in life. And that's why it's probably called The Tree of Life, because you're experiencing things. And I love this film. I really do. I think that is just a film that everyone should experience, unless, of course, you're someone that doesn't like this kind of storytelling method. If you don't like a film that is mostly visual based and now you as a viewer have to pinpoint and try to pick up on things as yourself because it doesn't tell you, you might not like this movie. But if you were someone that is all about experimental filmmaking, I think you'll really dig this movie because for myself, I love it. I love that this movie is something that each viewing brings about something different for me. It's an emotional movie. Honestly, the other thing is I wanted to mention this, and I know I've mentioned this in other reviews in the past, but this movie, just like any film, honestly, is like a friend. There are some times where you'll have a friend where, you don't want to see too much because it just kind of outlives its welcome, and it's kind of like it's a shame, really. But then there are other movies where, or just in this case, friends, where you'll obviously want to see it more and more. You'll want to see that friend more and more because you honestly grow as a person with that person. You guys both grow, and honestly, it's honestly my experience with this film. The Tree of Life is a film that I feel like I've grown as a person because of this movie. It's helped me out a lot, and honestly, I feel like this is a film that, even more upon viewings, I feel like this is a movie that I'll be a 70-year-old man. I'll be talking about The Tree of Life at like a old person home, and people will be like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'll be like, "One of the best movies of all time." Tree of Life is a film that, again, I think you should experience. And honestly, I know I'm battling at this point, but I just can't help but say it. Watch this movie. It's an experience. Tree of Life, for me personally, I'll be giving easily a 5 out of 5 star rating, which feels like a hot sauce rating. Gets a good old ghost pepper rating. So yeah, I love this movie. I really, really would recommend it to those, film buffs that are, into experimental filmmaking. It's an experience, man. But yeah, The Tree of Life. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on if you liked it or if you didn't. If you didn't like it, I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts. If you did like it, same thing. And also, Adam, thank you very much for joining this channel today. I will definitely be looking forward to you joining again, hopefully soon. And as always, guys, thank you very much for celebrating The Tree of Life turning 10 this year. You guys are the best. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.